welcome to the Dream Awake interviews. I am here with Peter Alsop, and he is a nationally known singer-songwriter, educator, humorist, and he has a Ph.D. in educational psychology. I'm so excited to speak with him today because his songs have literally touched thousands of people around the planet and really helped parents, educators, and human service professionals in helping their families to discuss really sensitive topics like child abuse, loss and grief, and chemical dependency. And all of these topics are just super awesome because they drop right into what we do in our Dream Awake school, which is tapping and really healing that inner child. So I've got lots of amazing questions for Peter today. And if you are watching this on the podcast and you want to check out the video, head on over to the Dream Awake School. You can sign up as a member. Go to jenniferpartridge.com/join life on tap. Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, Peter, for being here with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking me to be with you.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to dive in, and clearly you have so many years behind you in working in psychology and helping children and really helping a lot of these difficult conversations be birthed so that families can heal and people can really rewrite the future for humanity. And I would love to just dive right in and hear from you. What is the difference between healing a child earlier on in life or healing the inner child later on in life when you're an adult? Is there a difference between the two? And can you give us a little insight in how both of those work?
Sure. Thanks. As a songwriter, I'm real careful about the words that I pick because they have such power in our lives. They're part of the stories that we hold. You know, it's like someone that has been called a victim of rape. If they think of themselves as a survivor of rape, it's a whole nother story that they're telling themselves. So with that in mind, I don't feel like I heal anybody. What I do is I do what I've seen you do, and I'm meeting you now, but I've been looking at your videos. With your tapping sessions, you make a safe place for people to do their own healing, and you give them some guidance and ideas, but they're doing the healing themselves, aren't they? You know, absolutely. I think. And because I don't want people to be dependent on someone outside of themselves to be the healer, because the stuff that I think you and I both teach is filling people's toolboxes with stuff so they can do it themselves. So in terms of healing kids from child abuse, I don't know that you ever heal from it. It's an emotional wound as well as can be physical wounds that you live with. It scars over and you get to be friends with it. You know it's there. It's not something that it's not pleasant, of course, but any kind of trauma that happens like that, you're going to go, okay, I know what's coming up for me now. Here's how I'm going to mitigate it so I don't have problems in my life at this stage. Because the stuff that's happened before, I don't have any control over, do I? But now I'm grown up and I'm in a relationship, and maybe sex is required in this relationship or desired. And I've got a whole bunch of issues that triggers and stuff, and it's hard for my partner. What's my partner's stuff about this? What's my stuff? How can I heal and deal with stuff that I've stuffed down and don't want to feel because it's so painful and I've just locked it away somewhere? By golly, it doesn't take much for someone to touch a trigger and all of a sudden it's right there and you're going, how do I heal this? What do I do? And it's such hard work to do by yourself, because if you could have done it by yourself, you would have. So there's a couple things. When we talk about child abuse, I like to also always be thinking of prevention as well as the healing process, which needs to go on. It needs to go on in a safe place, an emotionally safe place, so that people can do it at their own rate. You know, let's talk about grief for a second, because it's the same thing with grief. When you've lost someone that you really love, maybe your mate has died, and after a while, your kids are going, you know, mom's still grieving. You know, like she won't leave the house. She's still got dad's clothes there. She hasn't cleaned out the closet. You know, how do you? You can't go to someone and say, you know, you've grieved enough. It's time to move on. Of course, people do say that. And that's not about the person who they're talking to. It's about their own difficulty in coping with the fact that this person's still in that place. You know, yeah, you're not the mom I was with before. You know, it's this finger that people bring out and tell you what you should be doing. I try to keep that baby holstered because most of us had someone in our life that was telling us what we should be doing. So, part of the healing for children is about, number one, how do you create safe places where kids can talk about this stuff? Because it happens at very young ages and kids get the message, don't tell anybody, you know? And a lot of times when kids are troubled and you know, they show us in other ways. They're acting out. I don't know how many of your viewers are parents, but I mean, certainly it's happened to me while I was parenting my kids. My kids would just be acting out and doing stuff. What are you doing? Go to your room. This is not okay. You know you can't treat your sister that way. And then I find out, you know, half an hour later that she's got 103-degree temperature. And I go, oh God, what am I doing? I'm yelling at my children about stuff. And so how do I stay in a place so that, and I know you talk about the inner child sometimes. How do I stay in a place where my inner child doesn't get triggered and come up and I go like, you know, you can't talk to your parents that way. I don't know if that's an adult speaking or if that's my little kids going, wait a minute, I had to listen to adults talk like that. Now my kid's talking to me. And this isn't, and who's driving the bus? My hurt inner child. So along with inner children, I think we need to have a safe adult. And I think that's wonderful because I think you're giving people skills about how to have a safe adult in there that can help take care of that inner child when they're having things triggered. Is that a good enough answer?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's an infinitely deep answer and we could go any direction with it. And when we're talking about having a safe adult, because most of the listeners or the viewers that are participating today with us are, you know, they're entering into adulthood, and not always, like you were mentioning, do we have that balance, that peace, that stability, that safety that we can create for ourselves or for our children, possibly because we had some wounds as children that weren't healed as well. So what would you say as a parent, as an adult, what do you do in order to create that safety for your children or just for the world around you?
Well, the main thing that I've been teaching for quite a while is, excuse me one second, on a call, okay? That's part of the relaxedness of this kind of an interview, isn't it?
Yeah, bring him on.
That was my wife coming.
Oh, okay.
My wife was coming back today and she didn't know I was doing this, so I just had to goodbye, see you later. What I've done for years is I've talked about happy, sad, scared, and angry. I think that the best thing any of us can do is look at our own feelings vocabulary. You know, I was talking before about somebody trying to get mom who's still grieving about the loss of her husband to stop grieving, and it's because it's their own issues that they don't know how to deal with the sadness. Emotions are contagious. You know, if you see someone who's feeling really sad, sometimes it brings up our own sadness. You know, and a lot of times one of the next projects I want to work on is I have like 27 albums or DVDs or things out that are dealing with stuff for kids and families. I see myself as a service provider to folks like you or other speakers or therapists to do things with people, to give them some tools so they can help folks get stuff out on the table in a safe way. It doesn't heal when it's out on the table necessarily, but it's a first step to know what's there and know how far you can go, which ones you want to work on, because there's so many of them when you spend years and years and years growing up. And often a relationship, our family of origins weren't always a safe place. Matter of fact, lots of times they weren't safe at all. Where would our parents have gotten the knowledge how to do that? Because we're just dawning on some of this stuff now and saying here's some things we can do to make life better and more safe for people. That's one of the things I love about what I saw about your work that I think is so important. So when I'm trying to remember, I just had an example of the happy, sad, scared, and angry thing. I've been teaching it for years because a lot of us don't have any. See there, yeah, there you go.
My dog is like barking. No.
we have to keep letting our audience know that there's little things that happen that we don't expect, and how do you walk into a situation and feel comfortable with it instead of going, oh no, the dog ruined the whole take. You know,
take a cut.
I think it's great to leave it in. We'll see whether you edit this out.
You know what? Dogs are like children as well. So talking about children and trauma and drama, like I feel like having a dog has been like my first step with having a baby, and it's training wheels, right? Because like they're gonna bark, they're gonna like not stop barking until you give them a treat, and it's similar type to parenting, I'm sure, at a lot lesser degree.
Well, you know, but it's the same stuff, because now you're doing, if I give the dog a treat, am I enabling their behavior? Is just going to encourage them to constantly bother me or keep barking until I give them a treat? Or how do I set boundaries? What's my stuff and what's the dog stuff? It's the same with all of our relationships. And when you love somebody, you've got to put into the mix, right now I'm going out the door. I don't have time to do the proper parenting for my dog that I need to do. So the answer is no, you're not getting a bone. I'll see you when I get back. Goodbye. You know?
Oh my God. Well, I think I'm a terrible parent then, because I just I over-treat, which means I'm probably going to over-spoil my children.
Well, that's
like
wonderful.
Whenever he's upset, I give him a treat and he's happy.
Right. Well, that's the thing about happy, sad, scared, and angry is that just because someone's happy doesn't mean that they're not angry underneath that, or that it's going to come back. You know, so it's understanding our own. You wouldn't teach someone to go into a classroom and teach kids to speak Spanish if the teacher didn't speak Spanish, right? So if we're going to help people have healthy feelings vocabularies, guess where it starts? We have to figure out what goes on for me when this stuff happens. You know, is that my inner child that's being angry? You know, when I went through some recovery stuff for myself, I came from an alcoholic family. I think a lot of us are what I call wounded healers, folks that had stuff go on, figured out how to get around it, whether it was sexual abuse or alcoholic families or being just disregarded by our parents because they were too busy. And then we're the ones that are always reaching out, trying to get attention. You know, there's all of these things that come up. And understanding what those things are about ourselves gives us some way to pass on some of our own self-learned knowledge about our feelings vocabulary to others in a way that's clear and useful. You know, so it's like I'm often talking about parents, you know, like what about the parents say, hey, what are you kids doing up there? Don't you make me come up there. And what are the kids doing upstairs? You're going, hey, look at all the power I got. I can make her come up here, you know? So what are we teaching the kids by the way we use their language? My dad always used to say, don't you ever let me catch you doing that. And I go, he didn't say, don't do that because it's not a good thing to do. And I went, okay, I won't ever let you catch me doing this. You see the difference in the message? Our language is so important because it's part of the stories we tell about who we are, how we need to proceed in our lives in order to be what we think is successful. And one of the things that I love about the tapping stuff I've seen you do is you get people to deal with some of the one I saw was about people that felt like they weren't happy with their job, but they weren't sure how to get your dream job. And I saw some of that. And I was just thinking, she's right on with that because people need to acknowledge this doesn't feel so good in here. And then you can break it down into what parts. Maybe it's just dealing with this boss. Maybe I need another department. I mean, all of that stuff, but it gives them tools in their toolbox so they can cope with some of the stuff that's keeping them from feeling more balanced in their lives and happier about who they are in the world. So when they look in the mirror, they go, yeah, we're doing okay.
Mm-hmm. And when you say you're guiding individuals to really think about how they're talking about it and reframing it in a way that's really guiding it to have resolve or to have some type of healing in the process, what would you say to someone who's just having a struggle with knowing how to frame things because they were never taught how to have that positivity or how to talk authentically about something because their family didn't do it? Is there like a step or a process that you would give to someone to help them reframe their experience?
I mostly work with people who work with people. Mm-hmm. I could have stayed home and had a clientele that I worked with, but I feel the stuff I've got is going to have a lot more impact if I can reach folks like yourself and other folks that are out there doing work directly with folks. So this is what I've done because I'm white, I'm male, I'm tall, I'm heterosexual, I'm able-bodied, I'm the oppressor in so many ways. And I need to be talking to my folks because if you're a black, lesbian, separatist, you're not going to be listened to by some of the people that are creating these problems. I mentioned the Me Too movement. I love that women are coming up and saying, yeah, me too, me too. So when there's 20 women who don't know each other to say this man is sexually abusing us or being abusive and not caring and hurtful, all of a sudden it's like we're not going to screen everybody. This is too much of a coincidence for this not really to happen. Come on, Bob, you're going to have to fess up. You know, it's the thing that I need to be talking to my own folks. So what would happen is I'd be on stage wanting to talk to a room full of social workers and therapists, mostly women, because of the pay scale. Men would go out and get jobs that paid more often. And how do I diffuse the fact that I'm not going to tell them what to do? I'm not going to use my father's finger because that doesn't feel safe, does it? Someone's telling you what to do. So what I did is I made this up and I said, I don't know what any of you should do. I know what worked for me and what doesn't work for me. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to do some smorgasbord teaching. You know, as guys know what a smorgasbord is, where people put the food out. And I'm going to say, well, that worked for me. And that you might want to try that. And that kind of worked. That part didn't work so well, but that worked. And then that worked. That was a miserable failure. And I'll tell you about those things and we'll sing some songs. And then you have a choice to take your training and go, well, I'll try some of that, but I don't care for any of that right now. Oh, that's not going to, this looks good. And by doing that, it makes it a safe place, because I'm not going to tell anybody what to do. We've all been told what to do so much. As a matter of fact, my latest song, which I haven't finished yet, it's called, you pick this, you need a good talking to. And I wrote a song saying, you need a good listening to. And the chorus is just everybody listening to everybody else who's not saying anything because they're listening to everybody else in the audience. It's silly, but it's also makes my point.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's such an important ingredient, isn't it? Listening. And like, if you were going to give one piece of advice to anyone and they could really pick it up, is like, listening is such a powerful tool for transformation, because listening to yourself and your own inner process and truly understanding it through listening, and then being able to listen to others and their process as well. So I would say in some way you kind of do have some tools that anyone and everyone could use, because it's basic to human nature, isn't it?
Right. But telling someone what to do, as opposed to sharing something as a wounded healer myself that I found useful or maybe not useful, they may say, well, that didn't work for him, but that sounds great to me. I want to try that. So by just sharing that, there's no pressure on someone to do something. I also wanted to talk about the listening thing for a second. I went through, I worked with I don't know if you know who Virginia Satir is, but she did a lot of family sculpting with people. And my degree in psychology, besides that, I'm a certified experiential therapist, which means getting people up and doing something. And there's a lot of people, I mean, the Freudian people, they talk and listen and talk and listen. You're having people do stuff, which is delightful, because it's the same thing I find happens with an experiential thing going on with singing. I get people laughing and crying in the audience, or I don't get them. I create a space where they can do those things. I like to think I make them laugh. I don't make them cry. They need to cry, they can. And we talk about that. But when I was doing some of my work with Sharon Wegscheider Cruz, who was the protege of Virginia Satir, who did a lot of experiential things with her clients, there was also some psychodrama in it. And I had picked someone out of the group to be little inner Peter. And I was talking to him, and my happy little kid came through with my adult, but my sad, scared, angry little child didn't. The angry child comes through in some of my songs, where I do things that are a little bit passive aggressive in the songs that kids are singing, and the parents are laughing because they can remember. I mean, I'm not like telling kids to go out and do anything really dangerous, but it's just like you laugh at the song because you're going, yeah, I felt like that. Maybe I should try that at the office. Or so I was talking to my inner child. They had me doing this, and I said, I really need your help, because without you, I shut down on some of those other emotions, and I want to have them present so I can be vulnerable and I can show up for other people. And I said, what do you got to say about that? And the therapist said, stop. He said, what? She said, switch. So the kid who was playing the man who was playing my inner child that I was holding on my lap in this psychodrama scene came and sat in a chair. He was me, and I was a little kid, and he asked me the same question. Well, I need your help. Why not? I don't ever hear you. You got to tell me more. And what I said to myself when I was a little child, I said, I'm screaming at you and you're never even listening. And I don't know where that came from, but it was the truth. Wow. We need to listen to our inner children more and not dismiss them, because it doesn't mean we have to do what they say. We need to listen to them because we need that emotional information so we can take care of them. And that requires that some folks, I'm sure some of your guests and clients and people that come to your workshops are wonderful parents for their kids, but some of the self-parenting has been missing because they didn't get it. And they're going, by golly, I'm not going to do what my parents did. And they're showing up for their kid. But how do you help them see that they have a child that could use some of that safe parenting themselves?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things that I really love about the tapping process is there's a part where you go back into the earlier memory as a child and you remember the trauma that took place. And then you envision your higher self, your adult self, your mature, evolved, loving, compassionate, understanding self come into the picture with your younger self, and to give your younger self what you needed in that situation. Because so much of the time the trauma is happening because we're getting something opposite to what we actually need, and to actually have that experience of receiving it. It might just be a hug, or it might be encouragement or support or taken to a safe place, but to actually have an experience where you're going back and giving that inner child exactly what it needed in that experience is super healing. And so many people just reference that particular part of the method because the child never got it, and now it's getting it 10, 20, 50 years down the track.
Yes.
So it really complements that process that you're talking about.
There's a friend of mine named Annette Goodhart, who is a laughter therapist. For years, I did it was a big program. I was put on by the Association for the Advancement of Human Behavior. But I worked with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and Benjamin Spock and Buckminster Fuller. They had these wonderful guests, and I somehow found myself sitting there, after the show, sitting there with these folks. And there's a bunch of different things that I learned from that particular workshop. And Annette Goodhart was doing laughter therapy, and she said, "Well, Peter, I'm going to write a book finally." And I said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "You going to take it out to a book company and get it done?" And she said, No, I'm going to self-publish it. Those guys they're not interested. They don't get it. And we talked, and I said, "Annette, is that your inner child that's afraid that they're going to, And I said, what you might want to try, because your stuff is so wonderful. It gets people laughing, which accesses all the emotions. And then they've got some data to deal with about how to proceed." And she said, "Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I probably should get my safe adult to take my little scared inner child by the hand and go in and say, you know what, here's our book. If you don't like it, or you feel abusive about it," and she's talking to her inner child now, "don't worry, I'm right here. I'm going to hold your hand. And if they don't want it, we'll just leave and take it somewhere else. But we should give it a try, because there's a whole lot more access to our information that we're trying to help people with. And if these guys don't get it, they don't get it. But don't worry,
Awesome.
I won't send you in there alone to try to sell the book. We can always self-publish." So that's the kind of safe adult one can have,
Beautiful. I love that process.
So I know you had a bunch of other questions, and I don't want to just hog the blab line here.
This is wonderful. Well, I guess that really brings me to the music question, which is you're using music to really help heal as well, and using affirmative phrases and talking about things through your actual songs. How have you seen that support children or families or practitioners?
Well, I kind of think of it as being subversive, frankly. There's a whole lot of adults out there who, when we talk, adults will listen. And particularly if you notice, and I'm sure you've noticed, you're a woman, you've been in a group with women and men, and who predominate the conversation usually, and there needs to be usually more than 50% women, if women are going to be able to do it. And the guys need to learn to shut up. We've been listening to white men for too long. And well, I mean, it's the truth, I think. And so I've had to learn to be quiet a lot of times in those situations. And what I found myself doing prior to my awareness in that way was going, ooh, 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 because I want everyone to say, so that they will say, well, what Peter said was this, for the rest of the conversation, and get my idea in as early as possible, because then I can sit back and seem wise, and people come to me. And what I've learned to do is be quiet. And if nobody says the idea I'm thinking, then bring it up. But don't you think women have had this skill for a long time? Yes, honey, that was a great idea you had. Let's go do it. Knowing that she put the idea in his head about half an hour ago, and he doesn't remember. He thinks it's his idea.
Yeah.
I'm whatever. It's like what women do so much better than us men do is, how do you make this work? Instead of, how do I be right? And it has to do with the way our male brains work. We tend to see black and white, good and bad, put everything in a polarity instead of seeing it more as a continuum. And how do you make it work is not, a lot of times it's not one of those things. And guess what? What's happening, and what's happening in Washington right now, is there's a lot of little boys driving those large male bodies.
Exactly. Yeah.
You fill in the name you want, but what's going on? The example I use for that is if I'm driving in the freeway and all of a sudden somebody in the truck comes swinging by and goes, and if my little kid's going to take over, go, hey, you can't talk to me that way. Now there's an 8-year-old in my car driving and a 9-year-old in that guy's car driving. Why am I chasing him down the freeway? And one of the things at one of the conferences, the Laughter and Play conference, there's a man named Sid Caesar, who a lot of your folks might not know of, but he has been around a long time with Steve Allen, a lot of the really old comedians, and had early television. Okay. And Sid had problems with alcoholism. And he was at the conference and he was talking, he says, if there's one thing I learned, it's this: life, it ain't personal. And what he means by that is when we're hurt by something somebody does, a lot of the times, most of the time, it's not about us. It's about what's going on for them. But if I'm aware of the little kid inside of me that can take over sometimes, then I'm going to be a lot more able to understand what's going on there and decide, I need to stop and call the police because this guy's going to have an accident, or I need to just let him go and not make him angry anymore. Just slow down and just go, okay, good luck. But I can't do that if my triggers are getting pushed. So I think a lot of what our jobs are is how do I go through my life and acknowledge when there's a trigger and go, whoa, that was a lot stronger response to something that I needed to have for that. Somebody made a perfectly okay request and I'm all upset now, what's going on? And as I can build some kind of stuff with that, some skills in that. So for me, the music makes it. This was a long roundabout answer to your question about when I said
it's a beautiful roundabout. Yeah.
It's subversive because I can do a song like Let's Go on Safari into my sister's nose, which has no therapeutic value whatsoever, except for the story that I told about how when my sister wanted me to play at her wedding and she's finally forgiven me for doing that song. It's a funny song, but when I play it for kids and grown-ups, people laugh because brothers and sisters have this little teasing stuff that they do all the time. And I talk about how I had to write my sister a long letter of apology 20 years later because I didn't realize she was being angry with me about it. And
their wedding day, my God.
Well, of course, but it was my family. And the humor was one of the ways we dealt. When painful feelings try to surface, we just laugh about it and discount it. And that's really a hard one to get over because laughing is so much fun. But sometimes it's about covering up pain, sadness, and anger. And how do you get folks to a place where they can understand it? And part of it's about sharing stories of ourselves when we do that. Our stories are so important. And what I find myself doing with the music is how do I help someone change their story? There's a song I wrote called Salmon and the Dragon about, because I've done a lot of work with kids with catastrophic illness. Here's language. I don't call it terminal illness because that's the language. And what happens is the guy goes to the doctor and the doctor says, I'm sorry, John, you've got a terminal illness. And John was feeling okay. And he's going, how long I got, doc? And he go, well, I got to give you about 4 weeks. And 4 weeks later, the guy dies and the doctor goes, oh, my prognosis is getting much more accurate. Well, the guy probably died from the catastrophic illness, but he also might have died from the story that this official doctor gave him that he only had 4 weeks to live. So how do we help people change their stories so that they're more helpful? So Salmon and the Dragon is about a little kid that goes into his own body and does battle with the dragon. And we know that there's science that says when you're getting chemo or radiation, you can do stories, do guided imagery like I've seen you do on your tapes with people. They're lying there with their eyes closed. That will help the chemo be more effective with overtaking some of the cancer cells and be more effective in killing what you want to get rid of and keeping what you want to keep, which is a message I hear from you all the time now that I've heard you finally. So I use music because it accesses both the left and right brains at the same time. There's people that are in the audience that a lot of times wouldn't be participating emotionally because we learn to shut down with words, but songs open you up in a different way. I'll tell you one more story. Somebody said, I don't know if this is a real story or not. I don't care. If it's a useful story, I'll hold it. It doesn't have to be actually factual. They said that in the early days when people started communicating, we used to sing to each other. That was the way we talk. But as we started moving into things 10,000 years ago, when we started doing agriculture, which created a bunch of issues for our human family, one being now we can grow food, which is mostly the women doing it, but now you've got a surplus of food. You own it. It's your food. When you would go in and just pick stuff off the trees, you were there before these other groups. So it wasn't yours. There wasn't a concept of owning like that. We have all this food. We need to have storehouses. And now they might come and take it away. So we need to have armies and soldiers to defend it. We used to sing to each other. And that what happened is that they found when these things started going on, where you needed to protect your goods and stuff like that, where a lot of ownership with beginning of cities and things started happening, they found that singing made how you were feeling too obvious to your adversaries. So they started developing language where we could talk about it. And we took all the emotion out of the language, or most of it. I mean, we see people speak heatedly, but that was, and I don't know if that's a true story or not, but it's a worthwhile story because it makes me remember that as a man, I've learned to speak and act in certain ways, to stay up in my head and stay out of my heart, so that because there's too much, I don't want to be too vulnerable because someone might take advantage of me. And in a society where we don't take care of each other, which I'm seeing happening now, it's been that way. I think capitalism has some problems with that. That there's ways that can make you feel like if I don't take care of this myself, no one's ever going to take care of me. You know, it's probably pretty clear that I'm more into trying to take care of each other, as most teachers are. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is because some of the depression that I see you running into when you're working with people tapping, it comes out as their individual stuff, but a lot of it has to do with this environment that we're living in that doesn't feel very safe, whether it was our family or whether it's our job or whether it's our culture. And how do we cope with that when that seems like it's way too big for me to cope with, to come up with a solution? So we just stay in our depressed state and take meds because that's the simple answer. Thank you. Well, it was a long one, but thank you for sticking with me.
Well, no, it's really interesting because, like you were saying, often we think that what we're dealing with is our own, but when you actually trace it back, you actually start to see that, oh, one of my parents had a similar habit and one of their parents had a similar habit, and it just is getting passed down through the family line, person to person, until it's reached you, and then you think that it's yours when actually it's just an energy that's being passed down and picked up. Because I'm sure as a young child between the ages of 0 and 6, you're in a semi-hypnotic state. You're just like a sponge. You're picking up, you're watching, you're listening, and you start to take that on as your own identity, which is why your work is so important, because if you can really change those patterns that were passed down, you can actually change the future of all the generations to come.
That's right. There's our brains at that point, when they're throwing out thousands and thousands of little tiny microscopic filaments, the dendrites, the neurons and stuff. And what happens is what we found, we used to say, well, gee, you come from a musical family. That's genetic, that music. And what we found is that's not exactly the case. What we find is that those little tiny thread-like things that happen, the ones that get triggered are the ones that will get stronger. And the other ones just fade away. They go away. They're not there anymore. So if you came from a family that was not musical, and you play music for your kids all the time in the house, and you even try to sing along in your own non-musical way, if you care to use that as a definition of yourself, what's happening is those kids in your family are hardwired to do music better than anyone else in your family, because that's never happened before. So when you go, well, that makes sense. But now think about it. When there's a lot of fighting and anger and drinking going on, guess what little neurons are getting triggered, so that when they grow up and you go, you're just like your father, So,
oh my gosh.
So this is one of the things that's so important. I think your work is so important, because obviously by tapping, it's not going to help my mom and dad right now. But if I can get in touch with some stuff so I can not react with my angry child when they talk, and see the hurt child inside my mom or my dad who maybe were abusive to me, I might be able to. You know what a mobile is? That all those little things that hang out in different places. And if you touch one part of it, everything moves. Well, what happens in the family is like that. So that if you can get to be healthier and more balanced yourself, you can create some other change in that family dynamic that you're not going to be able to do just by leaving and cutting it all off. It's about, and it's not your job to heal your parents. So I want to just say that. But if you can get yourself in a healthier place, you can decide whether it's toxic for you to be around your family for right now, but maybe it won't be later. Or you might say, I feel okay about this. I want to talk to my sister about some of the stuff that I've been learning about myself, because that's what we want to do. We want to share the stuff we learn from you, right? We want to pass it on if it's working for us, which is all those testimonials is exactly what I'm seeing. So I applaud you for the work you do.
And I applaud you for the work that you do, and being able to bring your passions together, because I clearly see a deep passion for psychology, but then a deep passion for the arts and for music, and to be able to bring both of them together, because psychology can be somewhat heady, but then music is an opening of the spirit. So to create a form of healing or medicine or technique that is offered to the world, which brings both of those together, is super powerful. And I just really want to honor you for that and your work. And if anyone is listening or watching this at the moment and wanted to find more information on you or your music or get in touch with events, how can they find you?
Sure. Thank you. Well, Peter Alsop, PeterAlsop.com is my website. If you go there, I've just started putting out a podcast. As I said, I've got like 26 or 27 albums and DVDs. And people aren't listening to CDs anymore. Some of my stuff started off as vinyl record albums. You know, people go, "What's this, Mommy?" It's a big CD, a Frisbee. So I've been releasing my kids' albums. What I did was I noticed with adult albums, you play a song, then there's a gap. And there's a song, and there's a gap. And I thought, I don't want to lose the kids' attention, particularly now that our attention spans are getting so short. So I would put a story running between all of my songs on my kids' albums, loosen it, not necessarily great literature, but it tied them all together, me and the kids going to the mall, me and the kids doing something in the garden, me and the kids doing. So I've broken them down into chapters, and I'm putting them out as podcasts now. So if you go to any place you get podcasts and put in Peter Alsop's Songs to Chew, it will come up, and it's free. And if you subscribe to it, then you'll be able every week or so, particularly for this year, you'll be getting all my material. There's maybe 15 minutes of one of the chapters of the albums. I have adult albums. I use a lot of humor. I've got a song called Frack, Frack, Fracking. There's songs about the different kinds of, one about We Don't Do That Anymore, about, I went out camping one night and the people in the next tent were fighting and she was screaming, "Go ahead, hit me, go ahead, hit me." My wife's going, "Go out there, you're a psychologist, deal with this." And I'm going, "Why do you think policemen don't want to deal with this stuff? It's dangerous." But I went out and just stood witness, and I didn't involve myself. I didn't tell the guy what to do or what not to do. And I wrote a song about that. I mean, so there's things like this that get us thinking about things. There's no simple answers to so many of these questions. It's about, how do I get myself in balance? How do I know what's my stuff I need to work on and what's the other people around me with whom I have relationships, my family and my friends, and what's going on in the society that I can participate in some way that's helping that. So there's those things. So thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I'm excited to go check out some of these songs. They sound like they're going to be a lot of fun as well. So if you're listening or watching, peteralsop.com, you can go check out his stuff, get in touch with him. And it feels like your intention with your work is to really spread this to more practitioners and healers and coaches as well. So there's so many ways that you can get involved with Peter's work. And I look forward to sharing more on the journey with you, Peter.
That'd be great. It's a pleasure to meet you, and thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Peter. And if you guys are tuning in and you want to see the video, head on over to the membership community Life on Tap, which is located at jenniferpartridge.com/lifeontap. Otherwise, I will see you in the next round, and all my love to you. Bye for now.